Hi, and welcome to Learning Kitchen Live. My name is Beth, and I'm one of the dietitians here at Community Servings. I'd just like to say thank you to our friends at Boston Scientific for supporting this programming. So today we are gonna shift our focus to the upcoming holidays, and I'm gonna be making an appetizer recipe that is really light in calories. So the reason for this is that, of course the holidays are a great time to indulge and have all the foods that we love to eat. Cheese, crackers, wine, all kinds of things. But sometimes it's really nice to have something to kind of offset all that when you're at a party. So I'm going to be making some vegetarian stuffed mushrooms that are really low cal. And that way, if you want to have a party and you'd like to offer something that maybe won't be so high in calories or fat, you can have this as well. They're also really easy to come together with some pretty simple ingredients. And I also wanted to talk about the fact that mushrooms have like a pretty decent amount of nutrition, so I think people kind of overlook them. They're technically not a vegetable, but they do have a lot of nutrition. So we're going to be using little baby Bella mushrooms, or sometimes they're called cremini mushrooms. You can use white button mushrooms as well, but what we're doing is we're cleaning them up and then we're just popping the stems out of them like that. So it's pretty easy to do, and then when you do that you have this nice little cap that you can stuff. So it's best not to rinse mushrooms off because they're going to soak up a lot of the water. So if your mushrooms are particularly dirty, which these are, you can just take like a damp towel like this and just kind of brush them off and get most of the dirt off of them. So what I've done already is actually roast off some of the mushrooms to start out with. So I have a bunch of mushroom caps here, and what I did was I popped the stems out and I put them stem side down, not on the paper towel though, just straight on the pan. And I put them in a 400-degree oven for about 10 minutes, just until like some water started to leach out of them. And then I took them out and took them back over. You can still see there's still quite a bit of water, but a lot of the water got leached out of them. This is going to help us so that the mushrooms don't get really soggy, or when you bite into it, like juice runs out onto your beautiful party outfit. So I already did that, and these are cooled now. And so I also did something else ahead of time that's going to go into our stuffing. So we're going to be using a roasted red pepper. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can put your broiler on and put your pepper on a sheet pan and just roast it until the skin turns black like this. Or you can actually turn your burner on if you have a gas stove and just carefully put it right on the burner and turn it with some tongs until you get your skin all nice and black. And then once that's done, you put it in a bowl, cover it with tin foil like I had done, and it's going to shrivel up and look just like this. So you want to do this ahead of time so that you can handle it and not burn your hands when you're peeling it. The third option here is to use a jar of roasted red peppers, which is totally fine, but it's so easy to do. And then you have control over, preservatives, and it's a lot less expensive to have them like this. So I've already roasted my pepper off, and then what I'm going to do is just gently peel the skin off. And you can see it's a little messy, but it comes off really easily once it's cooled. And so I just want to tear away this blackened skin, and what it's going to leave me with is like really nice, sweet, concentrated flavor of peppers. So you can, of course, do this with a regular whole pepper that hasn't been roasted, but I really like the flavor of a roasted pepper. I think it really adds a little nice sweetness to this, and it makes the stuffing nice and kind of more interesting in that way, especially because we're not going to be using any like bacon or sausage, which you would typically find in a stuffed mushroom. So I'm just peeling that away. It's really easy. And you don't have to get every last speck. It's okay to have some of it in there, but as much as possible you want to get it away. Okay. So now I have all of my ingredients for my stuffing. So I'm just going to wipe down my hands. So we're going to be using the stems from the mushrooms that I already roasted off, and what I've done is chop them up nice and small. And then we're going to be adding some chopped onions, some green onions or scallions, and we're going to cook them in a pan, and then we'll add some seasoning. So we're going to be using some panko breadcrumbs, a little bit of Parmesan cheese, some salt, pepper, and some fresh parsley. So I'm going to get my pan going. And that's the wrong burner. And I'm just going to put a little bit of olive oil into my pan. So I mentioned at the beginning that mushrooms have some decent nutrition. So one of the best things about mushrooms is that they are really high in some of the B vitamins. So folate, B2, and B3, and those are really helpful to help us repair our cells, and folate is really important for making DNA. It's also really important for anyone that is of childbearing age because folate is recommended to help prevent birth defects in a baby. Some mushrooms also have vitamin D in them, so if they're grown out in the wild, they absorb the UV light and make vitamin D in their skin just like we do, basically. But sometimes mushrooms, especially like big commercial mushrooms like these, are grown like indoors in sort of mushroom farms. But sometimes the companies put UV light on them as well, so it's hard to know if mushrooms do or do not have vitamin D unless it says so on the package, but very often they at least have some amount of vitamin D, which is also really important for our bones and for our immune systems. So my pan should be hot, and I'm going to add my onions and the mushrooms, and I've chopped everything up really tiny so that it will be able to fit nice and uniformly into our mushroom caps. All right, so I'm going to give that a stir, and then I'm going to show you what to do to finish off the pepper. Okay, so the pepper, I'm just going to take my fingers and kind of stick it into the pepper like that, and a bunch of juice is going to come out, and if we're lucky, most of the seeds will come out. I wasn't so lucky today, but sometimes that happens. And you can also just open it up like that and kind of just scrape the seeds out. So you can see it's a little bit of a messy job, but it's just kind of watery and stuff. And then I'm just going to take my knife and run it through and make it so that the pieces of the pepper are nice and small, just like the rest of the filling. And I'm going to add these after it starts to cook down a little because these are already pretty soft. If you were using a fresh pepper, you would want to add it with the rest of the ingredients so that it cooks more evenly, and so you don't have like more raw pepper in your dish. So that should do that. So we'll add that in. So the last thing that is really nice about mushrooms is that they kind of mimic the feel and flavor of meat a little bit. So I know a lot of people who are vegetarians like to use mushrooms in things that they might have used meat in, like in burgers, or even to replace some of the meat in something. And the reason for that is that mushrooms have a lot of an amino acid called glutamate, and that's what gives us that umami feeling. So umami is sort of a kind of a hot word that is considered the fifth taste. And so there's certain foods that have a lot of umami because they have that amino acid glutamate, and mushrooms are one of those. So it's sort of this hard to describe taste, but things like mushrooms and meat and miso and things like that all have that umami flavor that make things taste kind of special. All right, so that's all cooking down. And then before I take it off the heat, I'm just going to add some spices. So I'm going to add about a half a teaspoon of salt, and then a few cracks of pepper. If you like spicy too, you could add some crushed red pepper or another spice. And then we're going to add a little bit of oregano, so about a half a teaspoon, but you don't have to measure too carefully because it's not critical. You could also just use Italian seasoning if that's what you have. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the heat. And you can see I got this nice sort of soft, uniform looking stuffing. So I'm going to put it in my bowl. So ideally you would want to let this cool for a few minutes, but since we're working on the camera, we don't want to wait for that. So what I'm going to add are about 6 tablespoons of breadcrumbs. So I have panko, but you can also use regular Italian seasoned breadcrumbs, plain breadcrumbs, whatever you have. And then a couple of tablespoons of Parmesan cheese. So I have freshly grated Parmesan cheese. You can also use ground Parmesan cheese, and this will probably be the only time I'll ever say this, but I think in this case, the like green can of, you know, sort of mystery Parmesan cheese, I'm not really sure what that is, but I think it would be completely fine in this case because it's not gonna add too much flavor to the dish. It's just giving it a little cheesy bite and giving it some saltiness as well. We're going to mix that up. So now I have this nice breadcrumb stuffing, and we're just going to stuff the mushrooms and bake them off. So you can see some of these parts of the, oh, and the parsley too, sorry. So I'm adding some fresh chopped parsley as well. It's really pretty, nice and bright and green. Okay, so I'm going to take my tablespoon over here. And so you can see I have these mushrooms. So I'm not going to do the full 40 mushrooms that it calls for in the recipe because that would take too long. So I'm just going to do a few. So you want to spray your pan with nonstick spray or use parchment paper because these will definitely stick to the pan. And you're just going to take, depending on the size of your mushrooms, about a tablespoon. And it doesn't have to all fit in there because it can look nice and pretty and kind of come out a little bit. Kind of reminds me of those like stuffed quahog clams that they serve in New England here. So I'll do a few more and we'll put them in the oven, and then I've already baked some off so you can see what they look like. And if you really wanted to, you could sprinkle these with a little extra cheese just to give them nice salty bite. Okay, we'll do one more. You just want to make sure that after you roast off the mushrooms for the first time that you pat them dry on a paper towel because a lot of water will come out of them. Alright, so then you're just going to pop them in a 400-degree oven for about 10 minutes. And we'll do that, and I'll show you the ones that I've already baked. So you can see they come out nice and browned and nice and shriveled up. So we've really like concentrated a lot of the flavors of the mushrooms and the peppers even more. And so this would just make like a really nice low-calorie appetizer to add to your holiday party or you know, an office potluck or something like that. So that concludes our recipe for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you make it, and I hope to see you next time on Learning Kitchen Live. Thanks.